And it's not that you don't have to be worried if it's not up to code. It's just, it's not up to code, but is it working the way it was meant to be worked? Is it safe? And is it going to continue to work as far as you know? That's really what you're looking for.
Yeah.
But being up to code is in my opinion, one of the most wrongfully used terms in our industry. Misunderstood. They're like, it's not up to code. Well, so...
Okay, can we talk about inspections?
Good.
So what is the purpose of the inspection period?
So the purpose of the inspection period is to give you the proper amount of time to give that extra little look to the things that are important to you with that home. When you walk through it the first time, it's a pretty quick walkthrough.
Yeah.
And so you write an offer because you love the home, but you need to go a little bit deeper.
So what kind of inspections can I do?
Oh man, anything that has to do with the property. You want to look at the house, but you also possibly, it might be important to you to know the internet providers available in the place. If there's fiber, some people work from home. If they don't have fiber, it just doesn't work. And so that's the time to understand everything about the zoning, the house, what you can do there, what you can't do there, because that's your time frame where you find those things out and make sure it's compatible.
What you can park there, what you can't park there,
Oh, yeah.
how you have to park it.
How you have to park it.
If you want a fence, maybe you can't put a fence.
Yeah, that homeowners association in different areas is way more strict than in certain areas. So that's the perfect time to do that.
I would think also if you're rural, water rights and things like that.
Sure,
Yeah,
exactly.
Excellent. So how long do I have to get that done?
It has to get done within the time frame in your contract, and there's default time frames, or when you're writing the offer with your agent, you write a certain time frame of days that you want to complete all the inspections and have the report back to the seller to review.
So what is the home inspection looking for?
When you're looking at the home inspection and the inspector, what they are going to be trying to do is looking more like the roof when it's not covered in snow.
So in the winter, they would not be inspecting my roof. That's probably good to know.
If they can't see it, they can't inspect it.
Yeah.
And they'll disclose that. And they're going to disclose things that you might need to be aware of for the next year or two, 3 years, 5 years. And then they're going to kind of red flag some things that are kind of important, more now. And so some people get really overwhelmed by the inspection report, but really just know that there's going to be issues, and they're going to be looking for, are there cracks in the foundation? Are there leaks that they're finding? Are there leaks under the sink? The outlets, are they working the way they should be working? Are the drains draining the way they should be draining? And so that's kind of the main things that they're really looking for.
And like you said, the report they give you is thick.
Yeah.
And so the first thing you think is, whoa, am I buying a bad house? I didn't know there were so many things. But the inspector goes in and they will list everything out. They'll tell you the age of the water heater and the expected life of the water heater. And they will give you the report, and together you can look at it with your agent and understand it, so you know that I'm not buying a bad house. You don't have to freak out, and the information is in the report, because that's what you hire them to do, is look at everything so they report back everything.
Yeah. Many times we'll have, especially first-time home buyers, who will get the report and it will be overwhelming and they will just panic. And a lot of times we'll talk to the inspector and say, hey, the buyers are really nervous about this. Are there any real red flags? They're like, no. I said I'd live in this home. I mean, this is a great home. And then sometimes the buyers will even back out. They just get cold feet. And then the next home they buy, they find out the inspection report's even worse. And it's still not bad. Right. But I mean, there's no such thing as a perfect house without anything. I mean, there's always going to be something. So just keep that in mind throughout the process.
And most of the reports they do like a red flag section, like this is a major issue that needs to be addressed right away.
Yep.
And so it's good to know what is a big deal. It's rare that you ever get over $1,000 even.
It's sometimes hard to see all the little things that come along with homeownership written down.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But in the end, you're going to have little things in your house. Now it's all in front of you. Sometimes that can feel overwhelming. That can make sense.
It can be overwhelming.
So who orders the home inspection?
Well, you do. I mean, the buyer does. The buyer orders it. Many times the inspector actually wants to be paid at the inspection, and you can just write them a check. It can be anywhere from $400 to $500 based on the square footage is kind of how they charge based on that. And so our team, there's so many inspectors right now. I mean, there's new ones that pop up all the time. It's not a regulated business in Idaho, so it's pretty easy to become an inspector. So it's important that, we'll give you some recommendations on who we feel have good reputations and good track records based on doing a quality inspection and having the experience to be able to look through those things. And so we'll give you some recommendations.
But can I use anybody I want?
You can use anybody you want.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So how do I know when the inspection is?
Well, you should be the one scheduling the inspection, but you really won't have access. You won't have a key yet, so you need to make sure to communicate well with your transaction coordinator and your agent so you can coordinate when the inspection is so we can meet you there and open the door.
Gotcha. So can I attend it? So you said meet me there. Am I going to the inspection?
You need to let them know if you want to do that, because if you do, it's going to take a lot longer because you're going to ask questions and they're going to explain, and they're pretty busy. I mean, the inspectors are busy, and so if you want to do that, let them know. But typically, what they would prefer and what we see more often is the buyers can show up at the end of the inspection, and then they can kind of go through that report, and then you're only there for like 30 minutes instead of being there for 4 hours.
Point out the big items.
Yeah, and they can walk you through the home and kind of show you, hey, this is what it is and this is what it is. And that's good. We recommend it because then you can actually hear from them and be, I guess, consoled in that it's not like really like the house is going to fall down sort of thing, where if you don't talk to them and you just get the report and you don't understand those things, it might feel like a bomb's blowing up in front of you.
So I could be there and maybe ask them questions. How bad is this? And that will help me make a decision on whether I ask for a repair.
Absolutely.
That's probably, especially if I'm young in home buying and I don't know. The home inspector is a great person to. Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
So how do I know this inspector is qualified? If you said we're not regulated.
Yeah. So just like Chad was saying, there is no license required in the state of Idaho to be a home inspector or to do these reports. And so if you don't know somebody yourself, we will give you some recommendations because for the most part, most of them do a great job. We do have some certain inspectors that we know do a great job. And so we would love to pass those names on to you to make sure that we regulate the people that we trust and give that to you. So
you mentioned that they may want me to pay for it up front. So do I always pay for this? I'm in charge of paying for my home inspection?
Typically, we see the buyer pay for that. And unless you negotiate it in writing, you will be the only one paying for it because the seller won't pay for it unless they've agreed to it in writing in the contract. So sometimes it can be negotiable and sometimes the seller will pay for it. You don't see that as often though. Typically the buyer will pay for it. And then as far as how you pay for it, I mean, some inspectors are okay with being paid at closing and it can just be put into your closing costs. A lot of them though, it just seems, the majority I think kind of just write a check up front and just pay for it.
Well, if your deal doesn't close, then that inspector,
then they got to track you down. And so, typically it's paid, up front.
Yeah. So what happens if they find something?
They will.
Oh.
Most of the time there's always something, unless you're buying a brand new house and no one has used it before. There is always something that comes up that they have a recommendation that gets repaired. And then at that point, don't freak out. They're looking for major issues. We want to review it together and understand, your level of involvement if that repair wants to be fixed or not. And we can ask the seller to take care of that through the negotiation process, or we can take that on ourselves for a credit from the seller. So that's part of the negotiation, and we're making a video on that as well.
Yeah, make sure to watch the repair negotiation video. So what can I ask the seller to fix?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, you can ask anything. I mean, you can ask them to do anything. But here's the thing. Remember, this is negotiation. And right now, many times, negotiating the inspection can be the harder, more stressful part of the negotiation process.
The whole process.
Yeah. Sometimes getting the price and coming under contract is easier than negotiating the inspection part. And it's a meeting of the minds, right? Because the seller knows he wants to sell it. The buyer knows he want to buy it. They kind of know what the price is, so it's easy to come to the other there. But usually the seller doesn't know what a lot of the issues are that are going to come up on the inspection, and neither does the buyer, so it comes up and it goes from there. What we typically see is that, the seller will agree to fix, 2 to 5 things, usually around $1,000-ish, around there somewhere. Sometimes lower, sometimes higher, but usually around there is kind of what is probably the norm in what we see in our business. And so we kind of set that expectation there. But remember, the seller has their point of view, you have your point of view, and it's kind of, it's not going to be all about the buyer. It's not going to be all about the seller. You have to kind of somehow come together. Yeah. And it's really hard for the seller to see the point of view of the buyer, and vice versa for the buyer to see the point of view of the seller. And so that's where the agents come in, and we try to, reduce the stress and make it as smooth as possible.
Mm-hmm. So what if something isn't up to code? What if my inspection says something's not up to code?
Well, code's an interesting thing, because if you're going to build a house today, it has to be to code. But if you buy a house today that was built in the 1940s, it doesn't really matter if it's up to code or not. It just has to be functional and safe. And so if the electrical is knob and tube, Google it, it'll show you. It's okay. If it still works and it's still safe, it can be in a house even though you couldn't build that into a brand new house today.
And the inspector's probably going to say, this isn't up to code.
Right.
But of course it's not.
Yeah.
But it's not saying that it has to be brought up to code.
Right.
Because, it's not really realistic to bring a home up to today's code. That home that you're referring to has probably been around for 80 years.
Right.
And it hasn't fallen down or burnt down. Right.
So if it says not up to code, I shouldn't be worried necessarily about that. I should be worried whether if it doesn't work.
Exactly. Oh. And the second piece is how much longer will it last? Because they put code in place so it's safe and functional. And so if you have something that's functional, a coal furnace that's 100 years old, that could last another 100 years, but then you have to maintain it as a coal furnace. So just another consideration. And
it's not that you don't have to be worried if it's not up to code. It's just, it's not up to code, but is it working the way it was meant to be worked? Is it safe? And is it going to continue to work as far as you know? That's really what you're looking for.
Got it.
But being up to code is in my opinion, one of the most wrongfully used terms in our industry. Misunderstood. They're like, it's not up to code. Well, so...
Yeah.
Because it's not being built today, and the code is for new construction.
Any home built 10 years ago or more is not up to code, because the code changes all the time.
All the time.
So if we look at repairs, who pays for those repairs?
Well, that's all negotiated. So there's no standard on who that is. Typically you're asking the seller to complete the repairs, typically before closing. We strongly recommend that you have the seller hire out and have a professional actually do the repairs.
Do I need to request that specifically? I would assume that they're going to hire a professional.
Typically you see that, but sometimes people claim that they have experience in that area and they might want to try to do that. The problem is if it closes and it doesn't work, you have to go back to the seller and track them down. Whereas if they hire a company who's bonded and insured and established, then you can go back to the company. Mm-hmm. So typically the seller is responsible for that, and that's what you're asking for. And you kind of have two options of having them either complete the repairs, or you can just give a credit, and then you're responsible for doing the repairs after closing on your time frame, or maybe you can do the repairs, and you can do more with the credit than they can do with the money to fix it. So.
Can I choose who completes the repairs if I negotiate repairs?
It's in the negotiation of that RE10 or the inspection contingency release. If you've told the seller, I just want them completed, then the seller has the option to do the work themselves, like Chad's talking. Usually that's what the seller will do to try to do it as cheap as possible because they want to net as much as they can. If you are picky or you have a specific way you like things done, we would recommend that you ask for a credit. And as long as the home qualifies for the loan program that you're entering into, then most repairs can be done after closing, and then you just get a dollar figure credit from the seller and you handle the repair.
Makes sense. So if I want to control that part, a credit gives me the money to control that part.
Correct.
Makes sense. So if I've negotiated repairs with the seller, what if I'm not happy with the quality of the repairs that are done?
Okay, so you want to be able to bring that up before you buy it, okay? Because there is a time frame for you to actually do a walkthrough and actually inspect those repairs, okay? And it's sometimes can be in conjunction with the walkthrough, the final walkthrough, but sometimes it might not. It just depends on how it's written up in the contract. And so basically what you want to be able to do is just know what those time frames are and then bring it up. It's not actually, if you're not happy with how they do them, it's not a contingency for you to walk away from the deal. A lot of people think that like, oh, well, I'm not happy with this. I'm not going to buy this house. And I want my earnest money back. No, the contract doesn't read like that. So I actually want to read that portion of the contract because this is important to know.
Because this is a big part of if I don't like the house, if I'm unhappy with the state of the house and I don't want to buy it.
Yeah. And really it's about negotiate. You just have to negotiate with the seller, through their listing agent, through their agent. No, I don't like this. This isn't what we wanted. And you have to work it out between them. But it's not a contingency of sale. That's important to know. So basically it says here, the seller, and this is your walkthrough, right? The seller grants buyer and any representative buyer of the buyer reasonable access to conduct the walkthrough inspection of the property, not as a contingency of the sale, but for the following stated purpose. The first walkthrough shall be within however many business days. The default is 3. So 3 business days after the deadline for the completion of the repairs. And then you have up to whatever you put in here, 3 days, 4 days, whatever, to look and inspect the completion of the repairs agreed to as a result of the buyer inspection contingency for the purpose of satisfying buyer that any repairs agreed to in writing by buyer and seller have been completed. And so the main thing here is it's not a contingency. There's a big misunderstanding on that. And the Real Estate Commission, these forms actually changed just a couple years ago to even clarify that even more.
So if I'm getting this right, the thing I need to remember is my inspection is about major repairs. It's not about little, I'm going to find a lot of little things. There's going to be a lot of things, but my job
40 pages of little
40
things.
pages. But I'm looking for major things. Major things like cracks in the foundation or the electrical. Okay.
Right.
The way I like to have people look at it is, okay, I looked at this home, I liked it, I agreed to this price. What in this inspection is making me say, I don't want to buy this house at this price anymore, but I will buy this home at this price if this and this and this is done, or I will buy this home if I can get a credit of this much so I can do it myself. Otherwise, I want to walk. I mean, that's how you look at the inspection. It's not a wish list. It's not a Christmas list.
It's not a
honey-do list.
Saturday chore list.
Yeah.
Because that inspection sometimes feels like that. That's the kind of almost like a handyman's list. Because it says every little thing, but that doesn't mean that's what you should ask for in the inspection.
That's right.
Makes
And
sense.
speaking of, the majority of the things on an inspection list are all handyman type stuff. So
Okay.
Lots of information.
Lots for well.
rarely do you find the big stuff, but sometimes. Usually it's handyman stuff.
Got it.
So that's good info.
Yeah. So with good information,
You can
you
make
can
good
make good
decisions.
decisions.